Alright, so this is mad cow disease, done by me. Mad cow disease is a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy, which basically just means it's able to be transmitted. It causes things to take a sponge-like texture or look, and encephalopathy basically boils down to a brain disease. And it is a prion or protein disease. It's rare, progressive, and neurodegenerative, which means that it damages your neurons. It's most infamous after multiple breakouts. These occurred mostly in the UK, and after finding out what it was, they had hundreds of thousands of cows die. And it's actually pretty interesting if you lived or traveled and stayed in parts of the UK during one of these breakouts, you actually can't even give blood now, just in case that you could have came in contact with it and become a carrier of it. And that is to say that it does infect both humans and animals, and it's known for its long incubation periods. So a prion in this case is a misfolded glycoprotein, this being its normal coding. It's most abundant in your brain cells, which is why it's so harsh. The exact cause of why it happens is unknown, but they do know that it comes from a mutation on a gene, which is then this coding here. And once you have that one gene, it then codes all your other proteins to form into the abnormal prions. So there's a few different ways that it can be transmitted. As for humans, it's mostly just spontaneous. For them, it accounts for about 85%. However, in cows, it's only about 5 to 10%. And in humans, their spontaneous disease is Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is CJD, which is a variant of the bovine Spongiform. And then once someone has it, or they just have the gene for it, they can then pass it down. It's not clear how much that accounts for in cows, but in humans, this accounts for about 5 to 15% of people that get CJD. One of the biggest ways, at least for cows, is through ingestion. The disease has complete, it's not harmed at all during any kind of cooking. And a common thing to do is to take the leftover meat and bone of cow and grind it into a meal and put it into different feed. So it's very commonly given back to the other livestock, and it can be passed on in different variants to sheep, and it can even, there's a feline version of it. If a human ingests this infected meat, they gain the variant of CJD, and after infection, both animals and humans can pass it down to their offspring. So one of the biggest things about this disease is its incubation times. When it comes to bovines, the disease can take anywhere from 4 to 5 years after infection to even begin showing symptoms. And the problem with that is as soon as you see symptoms, it only takes weeks to months for them to actually die. And so in this time, say they get infected at about a year old, at a year and a half, they've reached sexual maturity and are being bred. So then you have years of them producing offspring while they have this disease, but you have no way of actually knowing. When it comes to human CJD, it works a lot like Alzheimer's or dementia would. It kind of stays with them, but doesn't really start incubating until later on in life, and it becomes a lot more likely after the age 50. The incubation can last anywhere from 15 months to 30 years, so it can be building up without any knowledge that it's there. But once your symptoms start as a human, death can occur anywhere from, weeks up to a year, but it's usually before that year period. When it comes to the variant, which is what you get from ingesting, The meat, it can last up to 7 years of incubation, but then death occurs usually on an average of 18 months after your first symptom. So I guess in that sense, that's one of the longer after symptoms that you have to deal with it. So, how does this work? During incubation, the single gene mutates once it's infected, and it changes the regularly occurring protein that's in your brain. So, it's able to go undetected for that entire time. And while it's incubating, it wires all the other proteins to form this same protein. So, it just kind of slowly changes everything into something that can fold all up normally, which to me is really interesting because it works kind of like a roller coaster where there's all these years that it's just slowly building up and changing, and then once it reaches the top, which would be when you get your first symptom, it's this quick rush right into death. So the activated uh, infectious prion, it starts to fold, and so as soon as it folds, all the other ones follow suit. And wherever they are, groups of the brain cells will begin to die very, very quickly. And these groups kind of form these microscopic holes, which is where you get that spongy looking texture to the brain. Something similar happens in Alzheimer's and dementia, but because of the quick progression of this disease, it has a very unique kind of look, separate from the other two. So, when it comes to symptoms, bovine will get kind of an abnormal walk. They'll get some weight loss as it gets harder to get around to the food. They have a change in behavior. They often will headbutt other cows or fences in random patterns. They'll get kind of an anxiety, and you can see that through pacing. And they'll have a lot of teeth grinding, which can come from both the anxiety and the pain that they feel. And then you'll also get a decrease in milk, which can be also from the weight loss and everything else, but just in the way that it affects their proteins. Now, in humans, it really appears like a rapidly progressive dementia, especially since it happens in older age people. And it can cause problems with muscle coordination, change in behavior, a lot like it would with the cows, and it can affect judgment. And if it progresses far enough before death, some people even get some blindness. So it's diagnosed pretty roughly. For bovine, they have blood testing where it can detect the mutated gene long before symptoms. And this type of blood testing came around in about 2010 is when they made it such an early detection. As for humans, they have more of a way to make a better educated guess. They have EEGs, which can determine that it is most likely CJD, but they're not exactly sure what type. And then there's the spinal fluid based test, which can detect the disease defining pathogens in 75% of cases, which is a pretty good rate. And it can do this before there's too many symptoms. And then there's an MRI, which is accurate in 90% of cases. But the only way when it comes to either bovine or humans to really be sure that it is the CJD or BSE in the case of cows is to autopsy. You can even do biopsies while they're alive, but it's not certain that you will get the piece of the brain that is affected the way the rest of it is. So autopsy is really the only way to be completely sure. And then as for treatments, well, it's about the same as Alzheimer's or dementia in the sense that there really is no treatment for these degenerative diseases yet. The only thing that they can really do is, try to release the pain and try to bring comfort to people that are afflicted by it. So thank you for listening to my PowerPoint. I hope that you might have learned something today, and I give permission for this to be used in further presentations. Thank you.